I ordered adjustable dumbbells straight from Alibaba, and today we're comparing them to the gold standard, the Rep times Pepin adjustable dumbbells. Are these $1,300 dumbbells better than a pair I ordered straight from Alibaba for a fraction of the price? Today we're putting them head to head. Adjustable dumbbells have gotten really good over the last few years. 10 years ago, you were looking at either Bowflex or power blocks for the most part, or spin lock collars if you like torture. One of the most talked about options right now, and I feel like mostly just positive comments, are the Rep times Pepin adjustable dumbbells. But here's the interesting thing. If you go to Alibaba and browse around, you're gonna see several dumbbells that look almost identical to some of the most popular brands right now. The Dumbbells, Trulap-style, all kinds of things for way less money. I broke down what my ordering experience was like on Alibaba in my last video. Check that out if you're interested in ordering some. So let's do a quick overview and comparison to dive into things here. Let's start with the Rep times Pepin. I have the 105-pound version. Retail cost would be $1,300 for these dumbbells. These have a push pin adjustment. You have to adjust on both sides, and then they go up in 10-pound increments. They also have 2.5-pound adder weights where you can drop in and adjust. Then as far as the Alibaba adjustable dumbbells, these are the twist handle adjustments. These go up in 2-kilogram increments from 2 all the way up to 40 kilograms. For my US folks, that is 4 pounds all the way up to 88 pounds in 4.5-pound increments, roughly 4.4. And these cost $434 shipped to my door with a stand as well. The Rep times Pepin stand I had to build. My father-in-law made it for me. Thank you, Beto. So that is some of just the general breakdown. Quite a significant cost difference, almost $1,000 difference in price there. And let's go ahead and dive into some pros and cons of each dumbbell now. Let's talk about the Rep times Pepin adjustable dumbbells and some of the pros with them. We'll start off with what I think is the biggest pro of those Rep times Pepin adjustable dumbbells, and that is the size of them. They are extremely compact for what you're getting. Mine go up to 105 pounds, and the length is actually smaller than the other versions, which go up to 88 pounds. Not only that, the diameter is pretty significantly smaller, which especially as you're getting into heavier lifts, it makes a big difference. You don't want these clown car dumbbells you're trying to bench press with when you're having the nice compact of the Rep times Pepin. Huge benefit of those. Other thing is the overall knurl of the Rep times Pepin. It has a nice volcano knurl. It feels almost like you're grabbing a premium barbell, which is awesome. Again, as you're getting heavier, you want a really good grip on your weights. Even when you're going lighter, it's still nice having a nice knurl. I feel like people are really into their knurl. I'm probably not as much, but it definitely is a factor for me. Other big pro for the Rep times Pepin is just that overall build quality. These things are tanks. You'd feel comfortable dropping these, no problem. And it's really nice knowing you have that durability factor with adjustable dumbbells. These come with a lifetime warranty. I'm never having to be concerned about breaking these dumbbells, which with adjustable dumbbells, anytime there's plastic components and things like that, you do have to have that concern. One of my counter arguments to that is with the increases we've seen in adjustable dumbbell quality over the past 10 years and how much they've advanced and how new designs continue to come out, I wonder if in 10 years, these Rep times Pepin, I don't want to say will be obsolete, but will there be newer adjustable dumbbell designs that have come out where some of the issues and gripes I have with them may be solved? And then, it's like you have a lifetime warranty, but why would you want to keep these when there's the next best thing? So let's start with the Ali adjustable dumbbells, the Alibaba adjustable dumbbells, and I'm going to call these Trulap or Bolt Fitness clones. They look just about identical to them. The first pro that I'm going to dive into is actually a con for the Rep times Pepin, but it's the quiet factor on these. While adjusting these, you hear almost nothing. While performing exercises, it's very silent. You aren't hearing a lot of clinking and clanging as you're doing things. It's really nice. The other pro with these is the adjusting factor. They are super quick to adjust. A pretty common adjustment pattern by now is that spin handle. You spin that handle and it adjusts the weight super easily, really quickly, and it makes it so it can be a cageless design. One of which I'll say my wife right off the bat immediately said she would pick those over the Rep times Pepin because of that cageless design, because of how easy it is to adjust, although the fact that they were listed in kilograms confused her. Instead of grabbing 16 pounds, she was grabbing 35 pounds. She was gonna tell me my dumbbells were broken because the weight was off. Another thing, this could be almost viewed as a hot take, but I like that it goes up in 2 kilogram increments. This makes for more minor adjustments. Now I know it is very close to 5-pound increments, but sometimes jumping up in those smaller increments does just help a little bit. It makes it a little less of a dramatic jump and having more options as you're going up, more weight increments. And especially on things like accessory work, it's nice having those smaller jumps. The other thing mentally with it being listed in kilograms is there's something where it's like I'm only going up 2 kilograms. When you've been used to pounds your whole life, those little mental games make a big difference. It's like when I'm counting reps, if I have 10 reps, I'll count to 5 and then I'll start over. I'll count to 7 and then I only have 3 more reps. And it's like I can do 3 reps. So it's little mind games. So seeing 2 kilograms in that adjustment, just mentally, I'm like, yeah, I got this. Another pro of these dumbbells is just the look of them. They look like a typical dumbbell other than them being a little larger. We'll get to that. But just look like a standard dumbbell, cageless, really nice, clean, sleek design. We are going to be talking about the cons of the Alibaba dumbbells first. And first con I'm going to mention, and this is probably the biggest one for me, the thing that stood out when I first grabbed them, is that knurling on these dumbbells is extremely passive, almost to the point where it feels non-existent. I would describe it almost as an interesting texture, like I can't exactly identify how it feels, but it doesn't feel like a knurling. It's like a bizarre feel to it. Now, for people who might not care as much about knurling, like for example, my wife said she preferred the handle on those versus the Rep Times Pepin. So something a little smoother. If you're not picky about your knurling, you might actually prefer this. And if you definitely prefer a less aggressive knurling, then that's going to be a pro for you. Second con with these is, and I mentioned this kind of in pros, but the fact that they are in kilograms, to me, I do have a chart and eventually I'm gonna have it memorized. It's just like plate math. It just eventually becomes second nature for you. And I'm sure that's how these will be. But I think for just general population in the United States, they'd prefer having it in pounds. So I almost wouldn't even qualify that as a con, but I have to at least mention it. Third, and probably the biggest one here, it's almost unfair, but I'm just going to say durability. It looks like some of the internals on this are plastic. And just in general, it does not feel as tanky as the Rep Times Pepin. I would never deliberately drop these. I would never deliberately drop the Rep Times Pepin either. I feel like there's a category of people who drop their dumbbells. That's never been me. I understand sometimes you can't help it, but I strive everything I can not to drop my dumbbells. Then the last con I'd mention is just the overall size of these dumbbells. They are fairly large. It's really not too bad, but it's definitely noticeable, especially as you're getting into heavier weights. It starts feeling uncomfortable and cumbersome. And I mean, it is heavy weights, so it's meant to be uncomfortable and cumbersome, but you don't want to be thinking about your dumbbells as you're using them in a negative way. And sometimes as you get heavier, I was noticing that. Our Rep Times Pepin Cons here. First and foremost, it's just the general noise on these. They are fairly noisy. Especially during just accessory work, those lighter weights. Maybe I need to control the weights more, but there's just some rattling. And it is enough to be annoying. I'll have my noise canceling headphones in here and I'll hear that and it's coarse and irritating. Does anyone get that reference? The next thing, and I almost feel ridiculous putting this in a con list, but just the adjustment of them, you're having to adjust both sides and then you have potential adder weights to put in. When you're comparing that with the alternative of having no adder weights, just twisting that handle, it's a little more steps. It's a little things that when you're doing drop sets and things of that nature, it gets annoying. The other con, and I haven't run into this, I watched a review where some guy said it was happening almost every time, but on the bottom of the Rep Times Pepin, you had to adjust where the ends are. And if you adjusted it wrong as you're putting them in, they'd get stuck. And this guy was actually having to bash his out with a hammer. I haven't had to do that, but it has gotten stuck one time for me. I've had these for a year now, so that's not that big of a deal. But just the re-racking process in general is a little more difficult than the Alibaba dumbbells. You're having to really gauge it and put them in and be worried you're going to be clinking on things. So for things like drop sets, it just becomes a little more difficult than what you're doing with the Alibaba dumbbells. I will say Rep sent out some replacement adjuster pin mechanisms. The first thing they had initially was terrible. It was almost like a keychain you pulled out, and it's a huge mammoth upgrade what they've done with the adder weights. Kudos to Rep. I think that's awesome that they look at something they created and they said, you know, this is not up to our standard. While performing exercises, I found myself gravitating towards the knockoff cheaper dumbbells quite a bit, and more specifically on accessory movements. So things under 40 pounds. That's what I found myself gravitating towards. And truthfully, most of my dumbbell movements that I like doing are accessory movements. Things like lateral raises, bicep curls, some tricep skull crushers, things that are accessory work, which usually require under 40 pounds. I actually would say I just preferred using the Alibaba weights. And honestly, I think one of the primary reasons for that is just the quietness of the knockoff dumbbells. The Rep dumbbells are just too loud when you're doing things. It's this constant clanging on almost every single rep, no pun intended. But it's just enough to bother me as I'm going through those movements. I mentioned earlier, you don't want to be thinking about your dumbbells as you're using them. And every single rep, that clinging, you are thinking about it. That and just the general ease of changing the weights with just one twist of the handle versus taking off the adder weights and undoing both sides. Again, not a huge thing, but just enough to where I found myself gravitating towards them. As I got into heavier movements, like my bench press is the main movement where I'm using heavier dumbbells, I found I did enjoy those rep times Pepin more. The smaller sizes made it feel a lot less awkward getting into the position. And I mentioned it earlier, but you just don't want to have to be thinking about your equipment on heavier movements. You just want to know it's going to work. You want it to not get in the way. And that's exactly what those rep times Pepin were doing. As far as a final verdict goes, and I think this might surprise quite a few people here, myself included, I came into this and I didn't think I would be coming away with these conclusions. But just as far as for a general population, I would recommend the Alibaba dumbbells 9 out of 10 times. If you are an elite lifter focusing on lifting extremely heavy, I would recommend the rep times Pepin. If you're someone who drops your weights, maybe you're clumsy and always dropping weights or things rolling off, the rep times Pepin. If you're risk averse and don't want to chance something breaking, although they did say they offered a 3-year warranty, but even then, if you're risk averse and you don't want to, chance ordering from an unknown supplier and manufacturer, then I'd probably recommend those Trulap dumbbells or the Bolt Fitness dumbbells, which are the same as these, just double the cost. I know I saw some people, Trulap adjustable dumbbells are listed in pounds and they couldn't stand the odd increments, 36, 30, going up in the 2 kilogram increments. That's why I almost prefer seeing it in kilograms, because I agree, I think it might bother me if it was 17, 21, 27. I think I'd prefer just seeing 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Let me know if that would bother you in the comments. But if you just don't want to take that risk of ordering something that, who knows if they'd actually give me my 3-year warranty if I ran into issues. But I think it's telling that on the majority of my dumbbell exercises, and that's just the way I lift. Maybe if you are doing more compound, heavier movements, 40 plus pounds, you would want those rep times Pepin. But if you're like me and you're thinking, yeah, I mostly do lateral raises, curls, or maybe you're curling like 60 pounds, I need to catch up. And I would recommend the Alibaba dumbbells, the Trulaps, the Bolt Fitnesses. I think for the general population, I think they're going to prefer that. For really serious lifters who are going till failure on bench presses, having to bail on weights quite a bit, go with the rep times Pepin. So what do you think? Did these results surprise you? Let me know in the comments which adjustable dumbbell set you would find yourself gravitating towards and which one you think you would buy and purchase to have in your own home gym. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you found this beneficial, interesting, be sure to subscribe. I'm a newer channel, so I appreciate every subscriber that I get. Give a thumbs up if you liked the video, and I will see y'all next time.